education, it's a service, it's not a location. Do you know what the location options are? Do you? Or do you think you know? As I sit in special ed meetings every day, I realize very few people understand the true depth and breadth of the continuum of services. Everybody say it with me. Continuum has several vowels. And so if you don't know what the continuum of services are, you might agree upon a setting that is restrictive for your child, or not appropriate, or not good for any reason at all. So let's talk about what a continuum of services are in special education. If we haven't met, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, helping families navigate and negotiate the special education process between the ages of 3 and 21. And yes, nobody got bit today. How many of you guys are on the last day of school? Hallelujah, right? We're so excited. Our district has 2 more weeks of being grown-ups. And then we'll get a summer break, because that's what we needed, you guys, right? We needed a summer break because we were running low on summer breaks. So that is what we're doing. We are excited that you guys are here. We're going to help you understand that if you know what the continuum of services are, you and the IEP team will be able to best program for your child with disabilities. So thanks you guys for jumping on. Yes, I'm kind of almost on time tonight. It's exciting. So we're going to talk about a continuum of services. I sit in meetings all the time, and I'm surprised at how many administrators, how many teachers do not know what a continuum of services are. And if you don't know what a continuum of services are, you're going to jump and make an adjustment that's too extreme, or didn't trial something in between. Oh, that should be a shirt. Okay, so there's a continuum of services. One of the things I hear parents be told all the time, parents be told, is that good English? That is really good. Parents be told, I don't know what that is you don't want that special education. Oh, I mean, you don't want to go, those kids are, their behavior problems. They are a lot of work. I mean, those kids, they get in fights. What? So before you believe something, you might want to know what it really is. So a continuum of service, which is where we got LRE from, least restrictive environment. Least restrictive environment says what? That we educate students with disabilities to the maximum extent possible with their non-disabled peers, with strategies and supports to serve them, so that they can have what? An educational benefit. Educational benefit, right? Not an academic benefit, not hang out with your buddy benefit, an educational benefit. And that covers the 3 things, right? FBA, functional, behavioral, and academic needs. So we look at those in tandem. We don't keep you in general ed because your friends are there, and we don't not put you in general ed because your friends aren't there. So we look at the least restrictive environment, and then we'll go down the continuum and we'll talk about what that looks like and how it serves your student. And again, it's not either or. This is a continuum of services. So we look at each content area, each block of time, and say where would be the most appropriate place for this student to be served with supports and strategies to what? Make gains on their IEP goals. Okay? So yes, happy Friday. I mean Thursday, or who knows, it could be Sunday morning. Are you guys excited for the weekend? It's been one long weekend. Hey guys. Yes, it is the weekend. It's the spring break that's never ended, except for we're adults. Yes, this adulting thing was a scam, wasn't it? It's not what they told us. So let's talk about placement options and their descriptions. Placement options and their description. Where do we place a student to work on their IEP goals? It's not either or, you're in or you're out. So you need to know what it is, what it means, and where it is. Because a lot of times schools will say, not your school, but other schools will say, oh, we don't do that here. We don't have that here. You do have that here because you take federal funds. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, if you're not going to take the federal funds, you don't have to have it. But if you're taking the federal funds, you got it. But if you don't know what they have, you might not know what to ask for. And every special ed service product or program is not necessarily housed on every single campus. People get really upset about that. And you know what? My mamaw said, you got the same pants to get glad in you got mad in. Okay, so let's look at your kiddo, what they need, and where's the best place to implement their IEP goals. So of course, child find is what? Is that we go out and we find and we evaluate kiddos with suspected disabilities to see if they are in need of special education services and supports. So when we find that out, that in fact they are in need of that, we look at where's the best place to implement these goals and these support times and these related services. So the first choice is what? It's general ed with just regular, ordinary children, right? They're just regular. And our kids are exceptional. All kids are exceptional. So general ed classroom. And so many times parents are like, oh, I want to stay in the classroom. I want to stay in the classroom. I want to stay in the classroom. And they don't have an idea of what the other settings look like. I mean, I don't want them around the other kids. I don't know what that means. We're all the same kids. And I think it's really kind of funny. It's not funny, but when parents are really concerned about their age-appropriate peers and they're in junior high. Because there's a lot of age-appropriate peers in the junior high, aren't they? Yes, they are. So before you buy into something or believe something that's true or not true, you might want to find out for yourself. So here's the continuum of services, and I'm going to get you guys a chart, because who doesn't love a chart? All of you love a chart. So number one is general education classroom. So that is for kiddos that are, the student is placed in general ed classroom. He would attend if he did not have a disability. The student does not receive supplementary aids or services. A special education teacher may monitor the student on a daily or weekly basis. So that's general education. And almost always, 5-year-olds starting kindergarten should start in general education, unless the acuity of their disability so greatly impacts them that they are unable to receive an educational benefit from it, and their learning, their behavior impedes their learning or the learning of others. I feel like I did that in 1971 in first grade. Poor Miss Campbell. Anyway, so general education classroom, right? And it's not, you know, that's not the win. General education is not necessarily the win. It's about what's appropriate for your kiddo. Number two, general education classroom with accommodations and or modifications. Let's kind of tease that out. People use those words intermittently. I accommodated his modification, and then I modified the accommodation of the modification when I accommodated it. What? So an accommodation changes how we learn. A modification changes what we learn. Accommodation changes how we learn. Modification changes what we learn, right? So I'm being accommodated right now with natural makeup and a chair. I'm sitting in a chair. That's an accommodation. It doesn't change what I'm learning. It changes how I'm learning. I could be sitting on the floor. I won't, because I'm old. And my staff is too busy right now to pick me up. Okay? So that's an accommodation. We accommodate people all the time. So accommodations are great. An accommodation is just a little layer of something extra that helps said student be successful in the class. So some people want, you know, a wiggly chair. Some people want a chart. Yes. All the chart people said amen, right? So some people want, like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lights in here. And if I could get 20, I would be so excited. So my husband, he likes to learn in a cave. So it's different styles. Everybody's cooked different. How do you learn best? So general education classroom with accommodations, right? That's a little something extra that we slide in for a kiddo to help them be successful. You know, Billy needs to sit right here. Billy does not need to sit right here. Billy needs to have reminders to stay on task. Billy needs a break between, you know, tasks. Those sorts of things. Just accommodation doesn't change what your expectation is and what I'm requiring from you, but it certainly changes the how, right? A student attends general education class on a full-time basis. He receives accommodations and or modifications to the instructional program. So the first step of that is accommodations. So if he is not successful with accommodations, then we can add another layer in, and that is called ICS, in-class support. And so the in-class support person, which is a fancy word for the lady at the back, no, it's not the lady at the back, it's another support person, and that could be a number of people. It could be a certified teacher of the blind. It could be a paraprofessional. It could be another teacher. It could be a certified special education teacher. It could be a Republican, a Democrat, anybody. So it's a second person that assists the teacher of record in delivering the product and supporting those kiddos with a 504 program and or a disability. Those teachers may additionally do some reteach, reminders to get back on task, reminding them of strategies, helping them focus, that sort of thing. So general education classroom with accommodations, general education classroom with accommodations and in-class support. And then if that's not working, we've been delivering the product to Billy, he's struggling, then we look at what? Data. So I was in a meeting the other day, and the teacher, I love people. I love people. You know why? They're free comedy. I'm just saying. So the lady said, don't tell anybody, okay? She said, well, he's in my math class, and I mean, he is really struggling, and I just don't know why. And then she just keeps going and going and going. So I said, Miss Johnson, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, the child's advocate. I said, you said you didn't understand why he was struggling in your math class? Yes. I said, well, he has a specific learning disability in math calculation. He has a specific learning disability in math computation, and he has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That could be why he's struggling in math, but what do I know, right? So we already had the data, but when we have kiddos who are adorable and lovely, it's sort of hard for us to see the disability. You would think that that person that went to college and graduated would have looked at his special ed paperwork, but we make presumptions about people, right? And all of us do. So the reason he's struggling is he has 2 specific learning disabilities in math. And so I opened it up, took out his full and individual evaluation. He's 10. His math computation scores were a standard score of 76, which puts him in what? The 6th percentile. His math calculation was in the 8th percentile. And so there's a saying that says, only educators and administrators can take something simple and make it complicated. My job as an advocate is to make something complicated and make it simple, because most of us are simple, right? So I said, and she's like, yeah, that's in the low range. I'm like, I don't know that I would call it in the low range. If I was in the 6th percentile of paying my mortgage, I wouldn't have a house. If I was in the 7th percentile of going to work, I wouldn't have a job. And your IQ is stabilized at 10, sort of a trauma. So probably not going to grow up to teach algebra. I can't be sure. Okay. So you need to always be reminding the people of the data. So this kiddo had been in the class and he was just not doing well. So I said, so we would like a consideration of modified work. You would have thought I threw a baby out a high-rise window. And I don't do that, right? What do you mean? Well, you said he's unsuccessful. You wrote a PLAF. He takes really long time. You have to constantly be with him. Yes. Okay, so he's 10. So we've delivered instruction and we've reinforced, we've tutored, we've targeted. So at this point, we have to say, is this level of support appropriate? If it's appropriate, he's being what? Successful. And so the principal kind of got all up in her feelings, and she was like, well, I don't know that we're ready to put him in resource. Who said anything about resource? So modified work can either be in general ed or modified work can be delivered in resource. And she actually had to ask somebody else on the Zoom. She's like, I don't know what that. And I said, you can have it in class. You can? You can. Debbie, one of the greatest people of all time. So I said, yeah, you can have modified in class. You can? They're like potato chips. You can have it anywhere, right? So she didn't know that. In her mind, modified was a resource setting, which is fantastic. But we try modified work in the class, right? So they're listening to the grade level standard, and then what they produce is on their level, which is about 2 years behind or so. So I'm listening to the grade level expectations, and then when I get to work, I'm doing it on my instructional level. So what 2 things happen in class? Instruction and production, right? So I'm still getting that grade level instruction. Some is caught, some is taught, but I'm working on my instructional level. Now, if that doesn't work, if Billy's not successful, then we have a consideration of resource. So resource is, and you can split the baby in elementary school. Not a big fan of that. Don't tell anybody. Because we transition, because our kids like to do that, right? Don't you like to work 15 minutes and somebody says, Daniel, move here. Okay, I'm sorry, could you move over here? All right, now we're moving over here, right? Meaningful benefit, harmful effect. So transitions really impact a student. So we could split it, right? Half general ed, half resource. But really for me, and I'm not a professional anything, and I'm not like you smart people that finished college. If a kid is at the end of elementary school and they're 2 years behind, they're 2 years behind. And I hate to burst your bubble, but we don't close the gap. You don't close the gap. How you're cooked is how you're cooked. We can remediate behavior. We can remediate functions. Your diagnostic profile, the way you're cooked, fluid reasoning, processing speed, all of those things, they don't really move. If you know what they mean, you can help the teacher of record better support a kiddo, but you're not going to change somebody's processing speed. You're not going to do that. Because listen, if you could, I would change people's processing speed. Okay? So we consider what is appropriate. We don't go, ooh, you don't want that. I had a family, not kidding, a child was a kindergartner or first grader, and they said to the parent, I don't know if she'll graduate with her class. What? So if it sounds cuckoo, it is. Okay? So know what you're getting, know what you're asking for. And here's the thing, we want our kids to be successful at school. If we make school a beating, they'll drop out. Or they'll never go to school after they're 18 again because it was miserable. So it's our job to find out where is the appropriate setting for them. So you can have gen ed classroom with accommodations and modifications. You could have gen ed classroom with individualized instruction, targeted interventions, or RTI, small groups, those sorts of things. You can have general education with pull-out services. That could be general education. They go and receive related services, instructional services, dyslexia, all of the things, right? And when you need a content area that's more spiraled down to their level, that would be when you would consider that resource piece. It's not either or. Resources usually only math, language arts, and reading, right? We don't usually have science resource and social studies resource. We do sometimes, but it's very unusual. There's part-time in a setting, there's full-time in a setting. It's not a bell-to-bell thing. It's not like you're the resource kiddo, you're the general ed kiddo. Everything's fluid. Whatever you need here, you might not need here. You might use some science, but you're not having that writer's workshop, okay? Then there are self-contained special education rooms. Sometimes we call them units. Sounds like a prison, right? And there are ones that can be both. They can be self-contained and then they can be fluid. So there are adaptive behavior units, autism units, PASS programs, and we can kind of unpack those. And those are for kiddos that have a behavioral need. They're impacted by autism, ADHD, emotional disturbance, and sometimes they just need someplace else to go and do their work. They may not even have a cognitive difference, but the overwhelm in the class is too much. They perseverate on something that happened. They can't get back to work. And so we have a number of those sorts of self-contained classrooms. A self-contained classroom could be a life skills classroom. And those are kiddos that are working on an alternate academic product. They're not working on grade level material, and they're learning functional academics. Again, I have kiddos that are in general ed, resource, and life skills. Imagine that, a continuum of services. Is it more work? I don't know. Doesn't matter to me. If that's what the kiddo needs, that's what we give them, right? If you needed to do more work with the football team, would you do that? Yes. Okay. So we look at each content area. What is the most appropriate for that kiddo? A special day school. So a special day school, the student does not attend a regular public school. He attends a separate school solely for students with disabilities, usually with no opportunity to participate with non-disabled peers. So I think I have this year, I have 3 kiddos at a special day school, and we call that an out-of-district placement. So these kiddos had needs that were unable to be served at any campus in their home district. Some of those have psychiatric supports, some of those have medical supports, some of those have behavioral supports. Those are usually a 6 to 18-month window. You have to have return criteria to return to your home campus, but it gives that kiddo time to really work on their emotional deficits, their psychiatric deficits in an educational setting, behavioral needs. They're a last resort, because certainly we want to educate a student in their least restrictive environment at their home campus. Sometimes we have to move them to another campus, and sometimes we still can't serve them there appropriately. And so we look at special day schools. There's also certain schools that are for sensory disabilities, so vision impairment, the deaf co-op, hard of hearing, blind or visually impaired. So around us, we have a RDSPD, that sounds like. Anyway, regional day school for kiddos with hearing impairment. So our school near me serves 13 districts, right? So sensory disabilities, or what we call LID, they're low incident disabilities. So it's a very small population, and so we condense those. Then we have residential treatment facility or hospitalization. So I have kiddos that are hospitalized. I have kiddos that go to, no, not like Texana. Well, maybe like Texana. So, Daniel. Daniel, so in Houston, we live in the great city of Houston in the great state of Texas, the land of hairspray. So those are places that are really highly structured, and Texana would be one of them. But I'm thinking of ABC West, ABC East, Shiloh, River Oaks. Those are all kiddos that have really intensive needs and a high level of support, and very, 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 very structured. So Texana is more, in my experience, ABA based. We take 1,000 million goals, whereas these other specialty day schools are, you have language arts, reading, math, PE, and all the things. So then there's residential treatment facility or hospitalization. So those are places where kiddos need an educational benefit. Hey guys, but they also need access to physicians that can make changes for them based on their needs and their medical needs. I have kiddos that live in those locations, a hospital or residential treatment facility. We also have group homes, kiddos that have a high level of need, and they can't generalize the skills that they've learned at school, and so they live in a group home. So that then takes them to school and brings them back to the group home, and their guardian or parent has access to them at certain, on the weekends and certainly on breaks, that sort of thing. There are kiddos that go, in Texas, there is a Texas State School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and then there's a Texas State School for the Deaf. Those are both housed, obviously, in Austin, the capital of Texas. It's the only capital I know. It really is. I mean, I know the capital of Florida, which is Disney World. So, so those are locations that kiddos with a visual impairment and or a deaf or hard of hearing might consider for. They go to school there full time. So they get on a bus Sunday night and they go to that city, and then they are there all week, and then they come home on the weekends. And those are obviously very hard decisions to make, to send your little 4 or 7 or 10-year-old off. But if that's the level of care they need and you feel like it's appropriate, then that's a consideration. And then the last one is homebound. And homebound could be, you can have general ed homebound, you can have 504 homebound, and you can have special education homebound. So just for an instance, homebound means the acuity of a kiddo's disability or their medical condition, their immunity, and some kiddos just anxiety, they can't get to school. We realize that going to school is too much for them. Homebound is initiated and populated The process is started by a medical doctor, not your veterinarian, but a medical doctor. So a medical doctor has to say, the statute in Texas is a student is expected to miss up to 4 weeks of school. Doesn't say you have to be tied to your bed. Doesn't say any of that. And if you want to know where that statute is, it's in your state accounting and taking roll handbook, right? So you can come out in the front yard. I've heard so many shenanigans about the homebound. Homebound. And we saw you at Target. Okay, calm down. So those are sort of a quick overview of all the settings. You can also have partial homebound. Maybe a kiddo has fatigues and he can go, I don't know, 2 hours